So you guys would probably not know this, but in my main channel, my Brazilian YouTube channel, I've kind of picked up the reputation of being sometimes a little controversial, having strong, opinionated points of view. Now, some people appreciate and enjoy watching videos like that, and I guess I wouldn't have as big a following as I have unless some people really appreciated the content. On the other hand, some people grow to really intensely dislike people with strong opinions, and that has happened to me. There's a handful of people who flat out would be pretty happy if a semi ran me over. I'm not even exaggerating. So I set out this guideline for myself here on the Izzy Nobre Show. I'm not gonna tackle super controversial, hot topic issues. I'm just not gonna be about that here. I want better, more positive energy here, if that makes any sense. Today, though, I will break my one rule. We're gonna talk about religion up in here. Aw, shit, son. Hey everybody, it's me, hellbound heathen Izzy Nobre. This thing right here is the Izzy Nobre Show, of course. So let's just get something straight right off the bat. I have nothing against people of religion, people that have faith. As long as that faith doesn't make you do anything awful, say homophobia or terrorism or whatever is commonly associated with religions, I'm totally cool. You do whatever you want to do, man. I'm cool. Because it could be that I'm wrong and you're right, so I'm not gonna be smug about it. I am an atheist. And it's weird because there was a time in my life when that was the worst thing somebody could be. You guys, I guess, didn't know this because I never said anything about it, but I was brought up in a very religious family. Now, in Brazil, something like, I think 90% of the population is Christian. Some Catholics, some Protestants, some stuff in between. Practicing or not, that's how people describe themselves. Pretty much everybody there is a Christian. Now, my family was extra super Christian because my dad was actually the church pastor, and my mom sang in church and played the guitar and everything. So from a very young age, I was going to church several times a week and reading the Bible daily, at home, at school, at church. I went to religious schools. I read books about the religion. So I lived and breathed Christianity. And for the most part, that worked because I didn't know any better when I was young. And as I grew older, the explanations people gave me for this or that started not to mesh with reality anymore, at least the way I saw reality. I just couldn't shake the idea that it really didn't make sense for tragedies to happen every day in our planet when we're being overseen by a benevolent, all-powerful creature. So I started not to, it just didn't jive anymore, and we are trained to respond to these things, and those answers, I couldn't even convince myself with them. It didn't work anymore. I just didn't buy it anymore. But because I was brought up in that from a very young age, I just thought that these meant I was going through a crisis of faith. So I just gotta pray a little more, I gotta read the Bible a little more. And I read the Bible a lot. I got to the point where I didn't believe any of that anymore. One of the main things for me is that the idea of free will conflicts with the notion of an all-knowing being. I'll give you an example, and I'll use this magic card, which was, by the way, something that I couldn't enjoy as a kid because my parents thought it was satanic. There was a lot that we actually couldn't do because it was satanic or it had connections with the Dark Prince of it. It's silly. Anyway, take this magic card right here, right? Imagine I am about to decide whether I'm going to drop this magic card or I won't. But there is a creature that already knows whether or not I'm going to drop the card. If that creature can never be wrong, that means that whatever they predict I'm going to do is going to happen no matter what, because they can't be wrong. So that means when I choose to drop the card, if they had already predicted I'm going to drop the card, I had no choice in the matter, because again, I couldn't have held on to the card because that would have made them wrong. And that conflicts with the idea of an omniscient being. That was one of the things that really started gnawing at me, and I read all the explanations, and trust me, I know you're gonna run into the comments and say, no, Izzy, it's because of this and that. Just trust me. Of my 31 years on this planet, I spent more than half of that being a Christian. So I have heard all of it. I've heard all the explanations, and it doesn't work. It's one of those fundamentally, it doesn't connect. It's like saying a square circle. There's no way those two things can coexist because one contradicts the other. Now, I went through phases. I had my militant atheist phase, and I guess that was born out of that adolescent rebellion, I guess. It was very hard to come out as an atheist in a very Christian family, in a very Christian country. So when I finally was able to admit it to myself and to say it out loud, that's who I am and f it, I started rebelling against all the things that I was taught. I felt like I had been lied to most of my life by adults that I saw as authority figures who really should know better. How come I'm just a stupid 17-year-old? How have I figured this out? And my parents haven't. Like, what's going on? So it really manifested itself in this anger. I remember seeking out Christians to debate, and because I knew the scripture so well and I knew all the little things they would argue, because that's what I used to do when I was younger, I was brought up to these really weird notions. Like, I was told as a child that my grandmother would go to hell because she was a Catholic. So imagine what that does to a child, hearing that his grandmother, who couldn't hurt a fly, is going to go to hell because while she worships the same God, she doesn't do it quite the same way we do it. And I had to believe that that is fair. That my grandmother, at worst, just mistaken about the way that she's supposed to worship this being, is going to suffer through all eternity. And a murderer who accepts Christ moments before he dies, if he does it honestly, deserves to go to heaven. I was also taught as a child at the times that God swooped down from heavens and killed everybody or sent his angels to do it for him. That is fair and that is moral. And you can't say that it isn't, because if God does something, whatever that is, it is by definition good. And being taught that as a kid, I see it now as really f***ed up to say to a child sometimes it's okay to kill a whole bunch of people just because they worship somebody else. So I guess that was the source of that, my teenage atheist angst, is that I felt frustrated. I felt that I was taught a whole bunch of stuff that was just worthless, or worse than that, it was actually negative. So I just felt wronged. I felt that the people who were my parents, my teachers, pastors, everybody around me, my whole circle, everyone in my life, all the authority figures in my life had lied to me. Whether they knew they were lying or they were lied to themselves and are just perpetuating the lie, it didn't matter. I felt like the whole world around me was a lie, and I was naturally angry. The days of being an angry atheist are behind me. I mellowed out. I have nothing against anybody of faith, because again, I could be wrong. That's the big thing about atheism, is that it's not so much I know there is no God, it's very much like I just don't believe it because I don't see a reason to. The same way you don't believe Santa Claus or Greek gods for that matter. You just don't see a reason to. So in a way you are an atheist about Greek gods. But now I'm curious about you guys. I imagine most people who watch my show do that because they feel a connection with me, so I imagine they think similarly, maybe about religion as well. So I imagine there's probably a bunch of atheists among you, but I know there's a few Christians who watch me, a few Muslims as well. So I'm curious now, what religion do you practice, if any? That's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy and I'm done. I guess that head's too small. Ah, fuck.